Thank you, Diane. My name's Jane. I'm going to be your service coordinator today. I have the lurgy that everybody has, so forgive me, please, if I sound a little croaky. Oh, getting taller. Thank you. Excuse me. Lots of things going on in North Chapel. If you would take a minute and just read through, but I want to draw your attention to the notice on the back of the service. We have a fundraiser that is happening tonight. It's going to be really cool, and it's something that I've never really kind of experienced, but Jeannie is going to teach us and show us the benefits of being a clown, I think is this one. Yeah, Patch Adams, right? And that's kind of cool. So take a minute, have a read through that, and hope to see many of you there. We also have soup in the parlor downstairs after service today. There's going to be a vegetarian option and a non-vegetarian option. And there's also treats if you don't feel like having soup, so please join us. And then if you are visiting with us today, we'd like to invite you to sign the book at the back, and we'd like to say hi to you. Feel free to pop downstairs. I don't think we have any brand new visitors, but feel free to pop downstairs after service and we'll say hi. And the thing that I always forget, make sure your cell phone's on silent or turned off. I don't think I ever turn my cell phone off, but silent is an option as well. Brianne is here today. She's going to be providing spiritual exploration for our kiddos downstairs. Thank you, Brianne. After these words from Brenda Euland, we will have a time of silence for meditation and prayer. Listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force. When we are listened to, it creates us, makes us unfold and expand. Ideas actually begin to grow within us and come to life. When we listen to people, there is an alternating current, and this recharges us so that we never get tired of each other. And it's this little creative fountain inside us that begins to spring and cast up new thoughts and unexpected laughter and wisdom. Well, it is when people really listen to us with quiet, fascinated attention that the little fountain begins to work again, to accelerate in the most surprising ways.
How open is this universally loving heart? Sometimes as a sort of spiritual practice, I go to books that I like and open up to whatever page I can find to see what kind of wisdom it might have for me this day. And I went to this book called Taxi Driver Wisdom. I was looking for a very specific quote. The quote that I wanted to find was, "You're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic." I was trying to find some humility. I found three others. The first one says, you're not any safer in first class. The second one was for my more conservative friends. It says, don't be conservative with a new love. Be liberal and you will find out what you want to know. Don't stop them at each thing they say, or they will try to be careful with you, and you'll never know what sort of person they want to be. And the last one was, the one that came close was, the traffic, it slows and it speeds up again for no reason sometimes. Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. Today is Sunday, February the 23rd, and the title of this morning's reflection is The Enduring Signs of Hope. The first quote comes from a woman named Simone Weil, German woman from the mid-20th century. She writes, all of the natural movements of the soul are controlled by laws analogous to those of physical gravity. Grace is the only exception. Bill Doherty was a man that I used to know in Minnesota. I did my internship in St. Paul, so I got to know him back then. He was a super powerful guy, well known and much admired, a family guy, a former Catholic. He really helped the church that I was serving in St. Paul to reimagine Christmas, to reestablish healthy relationship with Christianity, which is historically correct but had fallen out of practice. UU churches had grown grouchy and skeptical, sardonic and downright bitter back in the day. Bill Doherty pushed up against that downward trend. He was like a daffodil in early spring, pushing back against the snow like on the cover of your orders of service. He defied the popular gravity of that moment in favor of an optimism that was a little bit over the top sometimes. Never disingenuous, but a little bit over the top, and a little bit annoying, personally. I remember that I was preaching one day and I started off with a question. I asked, would you mind if I told you a slightly untrue story about my dad? And Bill objected. It was inappropriate and a little bit funny. He thought that I was going to put my dad down, to unhorse him, to dethrone him from the bully pulpit with a quasi-confession in a way that was also a trend back then. And Bill hated that. And that's understandable, but I wasn't trying to put my dad down. I was just trying to share how close we were, and I wanted to exaggerate a little bit. It all worked out fine. Bill stood down and the morning service was a blast. I'm thinking of Bill this morning because I'm going to tell another slightly untrue story about my dad. A story about the enduring signs of hope that are all around us. As you may know, I have a rather nauseatingly sweet love for my dad, my hero father. When I was growing up, I really thought that my dad was Superman. And I was almost right. He had a belt and a cape and the Superman symbol emblazoned on his chest, but he couldn't fly. My feelings for my dad tended to be received in one of two ways. Most of the time, my feelings earned me a response of, "You're lucky," from those who enjoy or can identify with how I feel. On occasion, though, my feelings of my dad earned me a slightly more bitter version of "You're lucky," from those who don't enjoy or cannot identify with how I feel. I feel both ways myself. My love for my dad does not overshadow his shortcomings. He was not Superman, even as he spent much of himself trying to preserve that illusion for me, believing that he could. So in ways that I'm less comfortable sharing, I feel many ways about my dad. I honestly feel lucky because he was wonderful. And I also feel slightly bitter, not simply because he is gone from me and I miss him, although I do profoundly, but because my father was only halfway a hero. There was also another part of him that was just a man, imperfect, limited, non-heroic man. The part of him that was fatherly was heroic and was real. It was a role that he chose to play, a role for which he was well suited, and a role that he very much enjoyed. When I love on him so hard, it's his enjoyment of who he truly was that brings me joy. His enjoyment of his own life, born out of an experience of enduring hope. That's the Superman part. When I was young, I thought Superman was a little bit corny because he always seemed to be wearing his first initial on his chest, as if he had to advertise his work, lay claim to it. I thought it was silly. I overlooked it when I could, even though it was staring me in the face, until I learned that this letter on his chest was not a letter at all. It only looks like an S. It only looks like the 19th letter of the English alphabet. The likeness is absent from other alphabets, from the Russian and the Ukrainian alphabets, for example. But Superman still lives in the Russian and in the Ukrainian imaginations. Because the S on Superman's chest is not an S at all, it is a symbol from a world that's beyond us. If you recall, Superman was a strange visitor from another planet. His hero costume didn't come from Target. It didn't come from Madison Avenue in New York City. It came from a planet called Krypton, which is 27 light years away. Superman knew nothing of our ABCs. The letter on his chest was not a letter, it was a symbol. It was a Kryptonian symbol. It was a symbol of hope. Superman is an enduring sign of hope. And despite the fact that the years after my father's death have come with difficult revelations about his limitations and his imperfections, this journey is deepening me. It is connecting me more dearly with the spirit of life and to the person who he actually was. It makes me feel less exceptional, which is to say that it makes me feel less alone. My father's enduring sign of hope encourages me to live my life more fully, and I say that honestly and without exaggeration, and that's not the slightest bit untrue. Every parent knows this kind of hope, no matter how well they play their roles as mothers and as fathers. Every child knows it too, even the children who come into this world, as they say, by accident. It's a funny way to describe a child, by accident. I think it's strange to say this, and I think it says something about our culture, something strange and something probably slightly untrue. We like to love one another, right? Physically, with our bodies, and when we are intimate in relationship, and sometimes when we are not in intimate relationship. We are sexual beings. Many of us like to do the thing, the one thing, the only thing that tends to create life. I trust I'm not teaching anyone anything. We love newest life, youngest life. It fascinates us. We like to do the thing that creates life a lot, and sometimes when our behavior happens to create a child, we still say sometimes that it is unplanned, which I get, sort of. We say that it was an accident, even though we knowingly, actively, habitually, and lovingly took part in the process. Imperfect though it is sometimes, imperfect though it is most times. I wish that my observation about this was funnier than it is, but it's not, because there's a harder side to this, because we don't always knowingly, actively, habitually, and lovingly take part in the process. We don't always have our wits about us, We don't always engage wisely in the process. We don't always engage willingly in the process. As you know, there are sometimes tragic examples of this. Absolutely tragic examples of this. But spirit is far more powerful than tragedy. Spirit rewards the choices, the difficult choices that women make, the difficult choices that men and women make to survive in this life in the best ways that we know how. There are women who have become pregnant under abusive and violent circumstances. There are men, much less often women, who have engaged in sexual violence. Kathleen Doherty, no relation to my friend Bill Doherty back in Minnesota, Kathleen Doherty became pregnant under abusive and violent circumstances. Big Newt McPherson was a hard-drinking bar pug and a 19-year-old mechanic when he met Kathleen Doherty at a roller rink in a little railroad town in eastern Pennsylvania. She was 16. They met and they both wanted to get married. Well, they both wanted to get married at first. The relationship soured quickly, especially for Kathleen. She said, "I wanted to break off the engagement, but my mother said you can't because it's going to be in the paper tomorrow." News of their engagement was about to be printed in the local paper, and Kathleen's mother felt pressure and fear of embarrassment, and she passed that pressure and fear on to her daughter without hesitation. Kathleen was in disbelief, smoking her cigarette in front of the television cameras. 50 years later or so, Kathleen said, "Really? Really?" She had lost sight of the enduring signs of hope that were all around her. She said, "We should have never gotten married, but I thought I didn't have anyone to support me. I know now that I did, but at the time I didn't know because my aunt, my mother's sister, I should have gone to her. She would have backed me up, and we wouldn't have had, well, then we wouldn't have had Nudie. So, I'd rather have him." End quote. Extenuating circumstances like these means that there are what we might fairly call accidental pregnancies. But as Rick Warren reminds us, there are never accidental children. Newt Gingrich is many things, but under God, he is not an accidental child. There's no such thing. Kathleen's marriage lasted 3 days after Big Newt hit her and she walked out. 9 months later, on June 17th, 1943, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Newton Leroy McPherson was born. He was his mother's prize and was doted on by a circle of adoring female relatives. His father had joined the Navy and rarely saw the boy. His mother went on to work as a junior mechanic in a local war factory. One night at the roller rink, she met a young soldier, Bob Gingrich. He was a strong and silent type. He was willing to be a father to young Newt, and they married after the war. Over time, Bob officially adopted Kathleen's child. Surrendered by his natural father, the boy was now Newt Gingrich and had to adjust to life with a stern stepfather. This precocious only child soon had 2 new sisters, but no real friends. Newt Gingrich would say of his childhood, "I was never alone, but I was lonely, drawn to animals, everything from dinosaurs to snakes." It's interesting to think about the path that we take in order to become ourselves. How broken we are by life sometimes, how graceful we recover, how graceful or how haphazardly we continue on in life, against the odds and against the grain, depending sometimes on the level of shame that we may feel about ourselves. Shame can sometimes keep us from becoming our best and highest selves. Shame can make it harder or more difficult to tell the true and honest stories of life. The honest, true kind of stories that bring us together, not the stories that tear us apart. The honest, true kinds of stories that build us up, not the stories that break us down. The honest, true kinds of stories that fill us up with hope, not the stories that fire hope unceremoniously. It's so hard to endure these kinds of untrue stories, even slightly untrue stories, especially when there are traumatic consequences. It's hard when we are cut off from our true stories. Our true stories are so beautiful. It's hard when we are cut off from that which makes us whole, especially when the stories that we tell instead aren't tough enough to hold us together. So it's important to tell the stories of how we love, the good and the bad stories, so long as they are true stories, so long as they help us to remember who we are. Red Dirt Girl is a song by Emmylou Harris. She and Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, from a band called Dire Straits, they went out on tour some years ago, and I heard them perform this song on a DVD. I have a recording of the DVD. And the tenderness that they show one another is beautiful and amazing. And the attitude of the musicians, the other artists. Mark sat in with these Nashville types, Emmylou Harris's friends, I presume. Emmylou Harris actually attends the UU Church in Nashville, by the way. There's a choir member for you. Nashville is where Emmylou Harris lives. They all played instruments so beautifully, and they played this song that I don't know the name of. I tried to teach it to Forrest when we were playing years ago, because the spirit of the song is so beautiful, because the song has a little bit of magic into it, and we should always play the music that has magic in it. God, his smile, Mark Knopfler's smile, and her smile, Emmylou Harris's smile, their smiles when they're playing that magic, it sustains us. Mark Knopfler and Emmylou Harris are different artists, different musicians. They only seem like different artists and different musicians. Soul level deep, they are very much the same. We have to get over our differences. How open is this universal heart of ours? Mark and I realized, this is Emmylou Harris speaking, Mark and I realized by doing interviews together that we really are from the same, we have the same backgrounds, inspired by the music when we were young. It's basically folk beginnings. People think that we're so diverse, I'm over here in country and he's over there in rock and roll. But if you look back to the beginning, to where those seeds were first planted, it's from the songs, a kind of real folk beginning. I think that's what you hear in his writing and in some of his melodies. He's got those beautiful melodies and the wonderful stories that he tells. The characters that he's able to create, those characters. I love that kind of writing. I think that she's right about this, about the stories and about the characters, about what Mark Knopfler finds in a melody and about what he finds within us. Back in college, I fell in love with a song that he wrote called Romeo and Juliet, which is, of course, built on the William Shakespeare play. He wrote, "Love-struck Romeo sings a street serenade, laying everybody low with the love song that he made. He finds a street light and he steps out of the shade and says something like, 'You and me, babe, how about it?'" He borrows from Shakespeare so casually, "You and me, babe, how about it?" What a distillation. If Mark Knopfler had been alive back in the day, he could have saved young William a whole lot of time. Of course, the rock song version, Juliet is not pining, she is not wistful. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo energies have been replaced with tougher leather. In Mark Knopfler's version, Juliet is a bit more cavalier. She says, "Romeo, you nearly gave me a heart attack." He's underneath the window, and she's singing, "Hey, la, my boyfriend's back." But you shouldn't come around here singing up at people like that. Anyway, what you gonna do about it? The romantic tragedy of the original version is replaced by inelegance, dismissal, and loss. The artist sings, "You can fall for chains of silver and you can fall for chains of gold. You can fall for pretty strangers and the promises that they hold. You promise me everything. You promise me thick and thin, And now you just say, Romeo, yeah. You know, I used to have a scene with him. And he captures closely and succinctly how it is that we can be with one another sometimes, when we can pretend that we're so over it, not quite careful enough with one another. But the honesty of the art preserves something in us, deeply serves something in us. The song only seems like it doesn't have a happy ending. It only seems like it doesn't have a happy ending because the happy ending is singing silently within us. We live it out. Is singing secretly within us. We live it out. And it does it the music does us in when we figure out how to sing along with our own song. No matter where the melody leads, we should sing along. It's this kind of it's this kind of heartfulness, this kind of wholeheartedness, this kind of courage that calls us on. It's this kind of love that lets us tell the stories that are harder, more difficult to tell, the stories that bring us together, the stories that build us up, the stories that fill us up with hope and not despair, in good times and in tempest. Nashville is great at this. Emmylou Harris is great at this, and she shows us how great she is in a song called Red Dirt Girl. I've shared this song from this pulpit before, and I imagine that I will again. How else can the story deepen over time? Emmylou Harris sings this. Me and my best friend Lillian and her blue tick hound dog, Gideon. Sitting on the front porch, cooling in the shade, singing every song that the radio played, waiting for the Alabama sun to go down, 2 red dirt girls in a red dirt town, me and Lillian, just across the line on a little southeast of Meridian. Meridian's a fascinating place, but not for Lillian. She had her dreams, but she didn't know how to manifest them. She sang, the stars might fall on Alabama, but one of these days I'm gonna swing my hammer down away from this red dirt town, and I'm gonna make a joyful sound. Lillian wanted to get out. She wanted to escape. She wanted to be free of something that she didn't know how to name. She'd lost a brother in the war in Vietnam. The family never recovered. No family recovers from such a thing. And Lillian was so young, she didn't really understand what was happening. She just wanted to get away from all the sorrow. She grew up tall and she grew up thin, and she buried that old dog, Gideon, by a crepe myrtle bush in the back of the yard. Her daddy turned mean and her mother leaned hard. She got in trouble from a boy in town and figured that she just might as well settle down, so she dug right in across a red dirt line just a little southeast of Meridian. And she tried hard to love him, but it never did take. It was just another way for the heart to break, so she learned to bend. And one thing they don't tell you about the blues when you got them, you keep on falling because there ain't no bottom and there ain't no end, not for Lillian. A whole lot happens in the song that lasts only a few minutes. The song ends in tragedy, a house full of children, a hurting young mother who couldn't find a way to get away until the end. Nobody knows when she started her skid. She was only 27 and she had 5 kids. It could have been the whiskey, it could have been the pills, it could have been the dream she was trying to kill. But there won't be any mention in the news of the world about a life and the death of a red dirt girl named Lillian. But Emmylou Harris remembers her. And through Emmylou Harris, we remember her too. She remembers her beautifully for us, and something lives in us. It takes a lot of power to remember Lillian beautifully, and our wholeness is well served by remembering one another beautifully. And the downward pull of sorrow is just too great without such a power, without the willingness to defy gravity. In a book called Gravity and Grace, Simone Weil writes that all of the natural movements of the soul are controlled by laws analogous to those of physical gravity. Grace is the only exception. Grace defies gravity, and so can we. So do we. When we are 7,000 strong in a theater in Nashville, singing about a red dirt girl who we don't know, a red dirt girl who we've never met, a red dirt girl who loves and lives in us, a red dirt girl who is our wholeness and the very completion of our grace, the very completion of our prayer, as she determines to be and to become her best and highest self, for she is us. These are the stories that sustain us. These are the stories that guide us. This is the beauty that leads us on. This is the enduring sign of hope. I think it was Lori Marshall who told the story of Kathy, whose heart was so beautiful and big that she found someone sleeping on the pew and invited her home. How open is this universally loving heart of ours? We can do it a number of ways. We can play shy if we want to, or we can realize how strong we are and get to work. We had a beautiful conversation with the board last week about how to deal with this predicament that we're in, how to deal with the world. And the beautiful gesture, I was reminded of the grace of this place by the tenor of that conversation, and the choice to preserve the meaning of sanctuary in this room. But for those of us who are interested in engaging or being critical, I will be leading a series of conversations. The first one will be today, unannounced, about how we're feeling and what we want to do about it. So long as we're driven by that grace, by that power, by that immortal love, by that generosity of spirit that's never gone from us, but remembered always. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.